I don't care if he was George Washington himself. Chief Deputy Miller slammed his fist on the desk, his face red with contempt. That old bastard's gonna get burned and dumped in Potter's Field like the worthless vagrant he is. No ceremony, no flag, no nothing. The funeral home administrator shifted uncomfortably, clutching Arthur Penny's thin file. Sir, there's a man here claiming to be his next of kin. Says he's taking the body. Tell him to get lost, or I'll arrest him for. The door exploded open. The man who filled the doorway wasn't what Miller expected. At 55, Commander Jackson Wolfe Sterling moved like violence personified, controlled, deliberate, lethal. His silver-gray hair was military short, his wolf-like eyes carved from ice, and a faint shrapnel scar traced his left cheek like a warning. He wore a leather vest, so clean it looked wrong. No skulls or flames, just names. Dozens of names. Dead men's names. You're not burning him, Wolfe said, his voice quiet as a blade sliding from its sheath. Miller sneered. And who the hell are you? Wolfe's eyes didn't blink. I'm the man taking Arthur home. The morgue was colder than it needed to be. Wolfe stood alone beside the steel table, where Arthur Penny lay beneath a white sheet, looking smaller than any man should look in death. 98 years old. D-Day survivor. Purple Heart recipient. Left to die alone in a state-run nursing home that smelled of urine and broken promises. Wolfe's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He'd gotten the call 3 days ago, a social worker's monotone voice informing him that Arthur had passed peacefully in his sleep. No family, no funeral arrangements. Would Mr. Sterling be assuming responsibility for the remains? Would he? Arthur had served with Wolfe's father in the Pacific. When cancer took the old man 20 years ago, it was Arthur who showed up at the funeral in his dress blues, who folded the flag with trembling hands, who looked 12-year-old Jackson in the eye and said, "Your daddy died doing his duty. You honor that by doing yours." Wolfe had joined the Navy at 18, made it to DevGru by 28, earned the Navy Cross pulling 20 men out of a Taliban ambush in the Hindu Kush, taking 7 rounds in the process. The bureaucrats wanted to make him an admiral, parade him around for PR. He told them where to shove their stars and rode away on a Harley. But Arthur? Arthur never asked for anything. Just sent letters, cramped handwriting on yellowed paper, asking how Wolfe was doing, reminding him that the warrior's path was lonely but necessary. Now this. The administrator's words echoed in Wolfe's skull. Due to missing documentation and expired veteran status codes in the system, Mr. Penny doesn't qualify for interment at the National Cemetery. We recommend direct cremation and disposition to the county memorial garden. Translation: dump his ashes in an unmarked plot with the homeless and forgotten. Over Wolfe's dead body. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the group chat he rarely used anymore. The Iron Patriots MC, mechanics, veterans, drifters, men who'd traded uniforms for leather but never forgot what the uniform meant. Wolfe typed, "Final call. Arthur Penny, 98, World War II. D-Day. Left to rot by the system. We ride at dawn. Destination, Arlington. He's going home whether they want him there or not." He hit send and pocketed the phone. The funeral home could cry to Miller all they wanted. By morning, Arthur would be in a flag-draped coffin strapped to Wolfe's custom sidecar rig, and 300 miles of asphalt would be the only thing between a forgotten hero and the honor he'd earned in blood. Wolfe placed his hand on Arthur's cold forehead. "I got you, brother," he whispered. "One last mission." Dawn broke bloody over Wolfe's garage, painting the sky the color of old battlefields. They came in 2s and 3s at first, engines rumbling through the pre-dawn mist like thunder gods waking. Big Al from the Southside chapter, his shovel head coughing black smoke. Juanita Jinx Rodriguez on her cherry-red Dyna, Marine Corps tattoos visible beneath her cut. Even Razor from the Northland Riders showed up, and his club had been feuding with the Patriots for 2 years over territory. None of that mattered now. Wolfe stood in the center of his driveway, watching the headlights multiply. 50 bikes became 70, 80, 100. Men and women who'd never met Arthur Penny but understood what he represented. The debt that could never be repaid, only honored. Big Al killed his engine and dismounted, 6'5" and 280 pounds of scar tissue and loyalty. "Heard you're telling the government to go fuck itself." Wolfe's expression didn't change. "Something like that." "Good." Al grinned. "Always wanted to do that officially. Jinx pulled off her helmet, her eyes red-rimmed. My grandfather landed at Normandy. Never made it off the beach. If they did this to him. She couldn't finish. Wolf nodded. They won't. Not while we're still breathing. The garage doors opened to reveal Wolf's custom rig. A murdered-out Harley Road King with a sidecar modified to carry a full-sized coffin. Arthur lay inside, covered by a perfectly folded American flag Wolf had earned himself, the one presented to him after the Hindu Kush. He'd given up his own honor to give Arthur back his. The coffin was locked down with military precision, black leather straps, chrome buckles catching the rising sun. On the sidecar's exterior, Wolf had mounted a brass plate with Arthur's name, rank, and service dates. SGM Arthur J. Penny, U.S. Army, 1st Infantry Division, 1927 to 2025. Omaha Beach, we will not forget. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Razor stepped forward, removed his club patch, the ultimate sign of respect, and laid it gently on the coffin. The Northland Riders ride with you. One by one they followed. Patches, dog tags, wedding rings, photos of their own dead. The coffin became a shrine. Wolf checked his watch. 0600 hours. Time to move. Listen up. His command voice cut through the rumble. This is not a joyride. This is not a protest. This is a military funeral escort, and we will conduct ourselves accordingly. Dual column formation. No wheelies, no burnouts, no bullshit. Anyone who can't maintain discipline can leave now. Nobody moved. We've got 300 miles to Arlington. The law will try to stop us. The media will film us. Let them. We're not doing anything wrong. We're just bringing a soldier home. Jinx raised her hand. What if they force us to stop? Wolf's smile was all teeth and no warmth. They can try. He mounted his bike, the engine roaring to life with a sound like God clearing his throat. The flag on Arthur's coffin rippled in the wind. Roll out. The thunder of 100 engines answered him. They moved like a armored cavalry, two perfect columns stretching back until the tail disappeared around the bend. Wolf at the point, Arthur at his side, 112 bikes in formation behind them. And that was just the first hour. By the time they merged onto I-95, the convoy had swollen to over 200. Riders materialized from rest stops, side roads, parking lots. Men and women who'd seen the posts on social media, heard the call on CB channels, or simply recognized the look of brothers on a mission. A Korean War vet on a vintage Indian pulled up alongside Wolf at a traffic light, tears streaming down his weathered face. He didn't say anything, just fell into formation. The lead news helicopter appeared around mile 70, circling like a curious vulture. Within minutes, every major network had scrambled their birds. The hashtag Arthur Goes Home started trending. Wolf ignored it all, eyes locked on the road, one hand on the throttle, the other resting on Arthur's coffin. The old man's final ride wouldn't be interrupted by spectacle. Then the sky opened up. The storm hit with biblical fury. Sheets of rain so thick the road vanished. Wind that threatened to tear them from their saddles. Lightning split the clouds, thunder competing with engine noise. Wolf's radio crackled. Boss, we need to pull over. It was Jinx, her voice tight with fear. People are going to get killed in this. Wolf keyed his mic, negative. We push through. Wolf, this is insane. Arthur Penny landed at Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. Wolf's voice carried over every frequency, every bike-mounted speaker in the convoy. He climbed out of that landing craft into water red with his friend's blood. He ran across a beach while machine guns tore men apart around him. He didn't stop. He didn't pull over. He did his duty. The rain hammered harder. So we ride. If you can't handle weather, you dishonor every man who bled in worse. Column integrity. Keep your intervals. We don't stop. For a moment, nobody responded. Then Big AL's voice boomed through the static. You heard the man. Tighten up formation. We ride through hell if we have to. And they did. The convoy sliced through the storm like a spear, 230 bikes moving as one organism, water streaming from leather, engines screaming defiance at the gods themselves. Drivers pulled over, filming from behind rain-streaked windows. News anchors called it unprecedented, dangerous, the most incredible thing we've ever seen. Wolf called it Tuesday, because this was what warriors did. They finished the mission. They brought their dead home. And they didn't stop for anything as mundane as weather. The storm broke an hour later, sunlight piercing the clouds like a benediction. And still they rode. Mile marker 142. The convoy had grown to 300 bikes. Wolf had stopped being surprised at mile 90, when an entire chapter of the veterans MC, 30 strong, appeared from a rest area and merged into formation without being asked. The old riders, men in their 60s and 70s with Vietnam veteran patches and eyes that had seen things, took up protective positions around the coffin without a word. This wasn't his mission anymore. It belonged to all of them. The social media posts had gone supernova. TikTok videos showed the convoy from drone angles, a steel serpent stretching for over 2 miles, American flags snapping from 30 different bikes, the rain-soaked riders looking like something out of mythology. The hashtag had evolved. Hashtag no one left behind, hashtag Arthur Penny, hashtag honor the rest, hashtag ride for the veterans. Mainstream media couldn't decide whether to call it beautiful or illegal. Wolf didn't care what they called it. His phone had been ringing nonstop since mile 50, block numbers, official-sounding voices demanding he cease this unauthorized demonstration immediately. He'd turned the phone off at mile 75. But the message had been clear. They weren't going to make it to Arlington without a fight. The first sign of trouble came over the CB radio at mile 155. Lead, this is recon. It was Spanner, a former Army scout riding 3 miles ahead. Got a situation developing. County sheriff vehicles blocking the on-ramp at the 160 junction. Looks like they're setting up a checkpoint. Wolf's jaw tightened. Numbers. 4 cars, maybe 8 deputies. They're stopping civilian traffic, checking IDs. They arm. Sidearms only. No long guns visible. Big L pulled alongside Wolf, rain still dripping from his beard. Want me to scout an alternate route? Wolf shook his head. We're not sneaking. We're not hiding. We stay on mission. They'll try to stop us. Let them try. Chief Deputy Raymond Miller was having the worst day of his career, and it was about to get worse. The call had come in 2 hours ago. Unidentified large motorcycle convoy, estimated 200-plus vehicles, moving through his county without permit or authorization. Possible gang activity. Possible drug transport. Definitely a problem. Miller hated bikers. Hated the noise, the attitude, the lawlessness. In his 20 years in law enforcement, he'd never met a biker who wasn't running from something. Drugs, warrants, responsibility. They were parasites in leather, and now they were in his county. He'd set up the checkpoint with relish, personally manning the radio to coordinate harassment stops along the entire route. His deputies would pull over stragglers, write tickets for every minor violation, make life difficult enough that the convoy would break up and scatter. Then he saw them. They came around the bend like the end of the world, 300 bikes, immaculate formation, flags flying. No revving engines, no showboating. Military precision. Miller's hand went to his radio. All units, prepare to intercept. I want every bike stopped, every license checked, every. He stopped. The lead bike was carrying a coffin. An American flag-draped coffin with a brass nameplate visible even from 100 yards out. And riding beside it, face carved from granite, was a man who looked like violence personified. Miller's deputy, a kid named Jenkins fresh out of the academy, lowered his citation book. Sir, is that a funeral? I don't care if it's the Pope's birthday party. Miller snapped. These people don't have a permit for a procession this size. Light them up. Jenkins hesitated. Sir, they're flying veteran flags. That coffin. Do your goddamn job, deputy. The patrol car's lights flashed red and blue. The convoy didn't stop. Wolf saw the checkpoint, saw the flashing lights, saw the deputies stepping into the road with their hands on their guns. He reduced speed but didn't stop, the massive procession slowing to 20 miles per hour but maintaining formation. One of the younger riders, a kid named Tommy with a nomad patch and too much anger, started to rev his engine. The universal biker sign for fuck you. Wolf's hand shot out in a cutting gesture so sharp Tommy nearly dropped his bike. The radio crackled with Wolf's voice, cold as a knife. Anyone who breaks formation, anyone who engages, anyone who gives these clowns an excuse, you're out. This is a funeral procession. Act like it. The convoy crept past the checkpoint at parade speed, engines rumbling like controlled thunder. Deputies scrambled for their cars, Miller screaming into his radio. All units pursue. I want citations for every. He never finished. because the second deputy car that tried to pull out was blocked by four massive bikers who'd accidentally stalled their engines at the exit. By the time Miller's deputies cleared the road, the convoy was a mile away. And growing. News cameras captured everything. The disciplined formation, the flag-draped coffin, the deputies' frustrated faces. The narrative was writing itself, and Miller was on the wrong side of it. But Miller wasn't done. Not by a long shot. He grabbed his radio with shaking hands. Patch me through to state police. I want Captain Ross. Now. The video that broke the internet wasn't professionally shot. It was filmed by a 16-year-old girl named Emma Chun, stuck in traffic on the shoulder of I-95 while her mom changed a flat tire. She'd been recording a complaint video for her friends about being late when the convoy appeared. The footage was shaky, rain-spotted, and absolutely perfect. It caught the moment the storm was at its worst, the sky black as sin, rain hammering down, and the bikers riding through it like nothing could stop them. Emma's camera zoomed in on the coffin, the flag streaming water, the old man's name on the brass plate. Then it panned to Wolf, face set like stone, one hand steady on the coffin as lightning split the sky behind him. Emma's voice, young and odd. Mom, they're bringing a soldier home. Her mother's face appeared in frame, mascara running from tears she didn't bother to wipe. God bless them. The video ended with the convoy disappearing into the rain, 300 red taillights like dying stars. Emma posted it with a simple caption. They said he didn't matter. These people disagree. Hashtag Arthur goes home. 20 million views in 6 hours. The comments section exploded. Veterans. Active duty military. Gold Star families. Regular people who'd never touched a motorcycle but understood sacrifice when they saw it. This is what honor looks like. Real men. Real heroes. The government abandoned him. His brothers didn't. But mixed in with the praise came the backlash. Law and order types demanding arrests. County officials calling it mob rule and dangerous vigilantism. Politicians desperate to look tough on crime issued statements condemning the illegal procession. The pressure landed on governor's office by mid-afternoon. And the governor, facing re-election and terrified of looking soft, made a call to state police headquarters with one simple message. Stop them. I don't care how. Captain David Ross was in a meeting when his phone rang with the governor's emergency line. He excused himself, took the call, and felt his stomach drop as the orders came through. Establish roadblock at the Route 95 bridge. Use whatever force necessary, no exceptions. Ross was 35, former Army Ranger, decorated in Afghanistan. He'd spent his 20s hunting terrorists in the mountains. Now he was being ordered to stop. Who? He pulled up the viral video on his phone. Veterans. Bringing home one of their own. Sir, Ross said carefully. With all due respect, these appear to be peaceful. I don't care if they're peaceful, Captain. They're illegal. They didn't apply for permits. They're disrupting traffic. They're making the state look weak. You will establish that blockade. You will stop that convoy, and you will arrest anyone who refuses to disperse. Am I clear? Crystal clear. Ross hung up and stared at his phone, at Emma Chin's video playing on loop. The old man's name, SGM Arthur J. Penny. The rider's face, scarred and hard, and somehow familiar. Where had he seen that face before? Ross had 90 minutes to deploy his roadblock. He started making calls, assembling a team, ordering equipment. Spike strips, riot gear, blocking vehicles. But the whole time, that scarred face haunted him. Those wolf-like eyes. He'd seen them somewhere. In a briefing? A photo? No. Older than that. A textbook. Military history. The Medal of Honor candidates from the global war on terror. The ones who'd done impossible things. The one who'd turned down the recognition, disappeared into. Oh shit, Ross whispered. He pulled up a classified database he still had access to from his Ranger days, entered a search query, and felt the blood drain from his face as the results populated. Master Chief Petty Officer Jackson Wolf Sterling. DevGroup/SEAL Team 6. Navy Cross, 2 silver stars, for bronze stars. The photo was 20 years old, but the eyes were the same. Ross was being ordered to stop a living legend. A man who'd saved more lives than most people would ever meet. A warrior who'd earned the right to be called hero without irony. And all he was trying to do was bury a friend. Ross looked at his second-in-command, Lieutenant Morrison, already gearing up the riot squad. Sir, we ready to roll? Morrison asked. Ross took a long, slow breath. Yeah, he said quietly. We're ready. But ready for what? He wasn't sure. The Route 95 bridge was a perfect tactical choke point. 1,000 feet of concrete suspended over the Potomac River, with nowhere to go but forward or back. Captain Ross had chosen it specifically because it was defensible, visible, and left no room for the convoy to evade. 3 state police riot vehicles formed a wall across both lanes. Spike strips lay in reserve, ready to deploy. 20 officers in full gear lined up behind the vehicles, faces hidden behind ballistic shields and visors. Ross stood at the center, radio in one hand, his other resting on his sidearm. The media helicopters circled overhead like vultures sensing blood. Every news network had gone live, splitting screens between aerial footage of the approaching convoy and ground-level shots of the police line. This was going to be a disaster. Chief Deputy Miller had arrived unsolicited, parking his cruiser behind the police line and climbing out with the smug expression of a man watching his enemies walk into a trap. About damn time someone grew a spine, Miller announced, swaggering toward Ross. You stop this circus, you're going to be a hero, Captain. Ross didn't look at him. This isn't your jurisdiction, Chief Deputy. Public safety transcends jurisdiction. These are criminals. Arrest them all. Ross's jaw tightened. Sir, with respect, you need to get back behind the line. Miller laughed. You can't seriously be sympathizing with these. Behind the line. Now. Something in Ross's voice made Miller step back. The state police captain had eyes that had seen combat, and they weren't asking twice. Morrison approached, lowering his voice. Sir, convoy is 5 minutes out. Traffic cameras show 300-plus bikes, tight formation, no signs of aggression. Orders. Ross scanned the line of officers. Young faces, most of them. Some probably veterans themselves. All of them about to be immortalized on social media either as heroes or villains, depending on how the next 10 minutes went. Make sure everyone has body cameras running, Ross said. And make sure nobody does anything stupid. Define stupid, sir. Anything I wouldn't do. Morrison smirked. That's a pretty wide range, sir. The rumble reached them before the visual, a deep, visceral thunder that made the bridge deck vibrate. Then they appeared around the bend, and even Ross, who'd seen a lot in his 35 years, felt his breath catch. 300 bikes in perfect dual columns, American flag streaming, and in the lead, the custom Harley with the sidecar, the flag-draped coffin, the rider whose face Ross had been staring at in classified files for the past hour. Master Chief Petty Officer Jackson Sterling. Wolf. The convoy slowed as it approached, engines dropping to idle, but they didn't stop. They crept forward at walking pace, inexorable as a glacier. Ross raised the megaphone. This is Captain David Ross, Virginia State Police. You are in violation of state traffic codes and failure to obtain proper permits. You must disperse immediately or face arrest. The convoy kept coming. Miller grabbed Ross's arm. What are you waiting for? Deploy the spikes. Ross shook him off. Stand down, Chief Deputy. That's an order, Captain. You don't have the authority to give me orders. The convoy was 50 yards away now. Ross could see individual faces. Old veterans with tears streaming down weathered cheeks. Young riders with hands clenched white on their grips. Women with purple heart patches and eyes full of fire. And at the front, Wolf. Utterly calm, utterly focused. One hand on the throttle and one hand on Arthur Penny's coffin. 30 yards. Morrison's voice in Ross's earpiece. Sir, they're not stopping. We need to deploy spikes or move the vehicles. Make the call. 20 yards. Ross could see the brass nameplate now. Catch the glint of morning sun on polished metal. Could read the dates of a life lived in service. 10 yards. Miller was screaming into his radio, demanding action, threatening careers, promising lawsuits and investigations, and Ross lowered the megaphone. Hold positions, he said quietly. Nobody moves. Morrison stared at him. Sir, I said hold. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. We wait. 5 yards. Wolf killed his engine. The silence was profound. 300 bikes went quiet as graves, and the only sound was wind across the Potomac and the distant thump of news helicopters. Wolf dismounted. Every police officer's hand went to their weapon, but Ross held up a hand. Hold fire. Wolf was alone now, walking toward the police line. He moved like water, like smoke. like something that couldn't be stopped or contained. The morning light caught the scar on his face, the silver in his hair, the absolute zero temperature of his eyes. He stopped 5 feet from Ross. "Captain," Wolf said, his voice quiet and conversational. "I need to bring my friend home." Captain Ross had been in firefights in Kandahar, had cleared buildings full of insurgents hopped up on adrenaline and God, had called in airstrikes with enemy rounds snapping past his head. None of it prepared him for the moment Wolf looked him in the eyes, because those eyes held something Ross had only seen a handful of times in his life, the absolute certainty of someone who had already decided they were willing to die today. Not eager, not suicidal, simply decided. It made negotiations complicated. Behind Wolf, 300 riders dismounted in perfect synchronization. They didn't rush forward or make threats. They simply stood beside their bikes, hands at their sides, watching, waiting. A wall of leather and purpose that stretched back across the bridge like a human barricade. Miller was still screaming into his radio, demanding arrests, but his voice sounded thin and far away. The only thing that mattered was the two men standing face to face in the center of the bridge. "Sir," Ross said carefully, "you're in violation of." "I know what I'm violating." Wolf's voice was calm. "Code 46.2 to 888, unlawful procession without permit. Code 46.2 to 852, impeding traffic flow. Probably a dozen others. You want to arrest me, Captain, you can. But that man," he gestured to the coffin. "Arthur Penny, Sergeant Major, 1st Infantry Division, landed at Omaha Beach on D-Day. He earned the Purple Heart pulling wounded men out of burning tanks. He spent 70 years being a good citizen, paying his taxes, voting in every election. And when he died, alone in a state nursing home, the government told me he didn't qualify for a proper burial because of administrative errors." Ross said nothing. "So I'm correcting their error," Wolf continued. "I'm taking him to Arlington. You can arrest me for it. You can arrest all of us. But you're going to have to shoot me to stop me from getting back on that bike." The news helicopters captured every word. Cameras zoomed on Wolf's scarred face, on the coffin behind him, on the 300 veterans standing silent witness. Miller pushed his way to the front of the police line. "Captain Ross, if you don't take action immediately, I will file a formal complaint with the governor's office. You are derelict in your..." "Chief Deputy Miller," Ross said, not taking his eyes off Wolf. "If you speak one more word, I will arrest you for interfering with a police operation." Miller's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Ross took a step closer to Wolf, lowering his voice so the media couldn't hear. "Sir, I need you to understand the position you're putting me in. I have direct orders from the governor's office to stop this convoy. I have 20 officers behind me who will follow my commands. If I give the order to arrest you, people will get hurt, maybe killed. Is that what you want?" "No," Wolf said simply. "But I want Arthur to get the honor he earned more." "What do you want, Captain?" The question hung in the air. What did Ross want? He wanted to follow orders. He wanted to keep his job, his pension, his clean record. He wanted to go home tonight and not have to explain to his kids why their father was the cop who arrested veterans bringing home a war hero. But more than that, God help him, he wanted to be worthy of the uniform he wore. The same uniform his grandfather had worn in Korea. The same uniform that Wolf and Arthur and 300 other riders on this bridge had worn in service to something bigger than themselves. "Sir," Ross said, still quiet, "I need you to state your name for the record." Wolf's expression didn't change. "Master Chief Petty Officer Jackson Sterling." "Serial number." "That won't be necessary." Ross turned to Morrison. "Lieutenant, run this name through the DoD database. I want full service record." Morrison's fingers flew across his tablet, and his eyes went wide. "Sir, oh my God. This is the Hindu Kush operation. The 20-man extraction. The Navy Cross citation alone is..." Ross nodded slowly, something settling in his chest. The certainty that had been building since he first saw Wolf's face finally crystallized into absolute clarity. He turned back to Wolf. "Master Chief Sterling," Ross said, and his voice carried across the bridge, across the news feeds, across the hundreds of millions of screens showing this confrontation. "According to military regulations, a Navy Cross recipient is entitled to full honors from any service member, regardless of branch or rank." Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. "Captain..." Ross wasn't finished. He stepped back, came to perfect attention, and raised his hand in a salute so crisp and precise it could have been regulation photography. The world stopped. 300 bikers went completely still, hardly daring to breathe. 20 police officers stared at their captain like he'd lost his mind. Chief Deputy Miller's face cycled through 17 shades of purple. And Wolf just stood there, frozen, as Captain David Ross held that salute with the kind of precision that only came from genuine respect. "What the hell are you doing?" Miller shrieked, breaking the silence. "Captain Ross, I order you to." "You order nothing." Ross didn't break his salute, but his voice cut like a whip. "This man is a decorated Navy Cross recipient. The citation reads, for extraordinary heroism in combat against enemy forces in Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan." Master Chief Petty Officer Sterling, with complete disregard for his own safety, remained in an exposed position for 4 hours while under continuous enemy fire, directing air support, and providing suppressing fire that enabled the successful extraction of 20 wounded personnel. "That's who you're trying to arrest, Chief Deputy? That's who you want me to spike strip and tackle on national television?" Miller's mouth worked silently. Ross continued, his voice rising. "The man in that coffin behind him, Sergeant Major Arthur Penny, has more time in combat than everyone on this bridge combined. He bled for this country at Normandy, and you want to deny him honors because of paperwork." One of the younger state troopers, a kid who couldn't be more than 25, slowly lowered his riot shield. Then another. Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward and came to attention beside Ross. "Permission to render honors, sir?" Ross's eyes stayed locked on Wolf. "Granted." Morrison saluted. Then another trooper. Then another. One by one, 20 Virginia State Police officers lowered their weapons and raised their hands in salute to a biker they'd been sent to arrest. The media cameras captured it all, the moment the narrative shattered and reformed into something nobody had expected. The moment law enforcement and outlaws became brothers in arms. Wolf, who'd been shot 7 times and hadn't flinched, who'd stared down terrorists and politicians and death itself. Wolf's eyes got wet. He returned the salute, his hand moving to his temple with the muscle memory of 30 years in uniform. When he finally lowered it, his voice was rough. "Captain, you don't have to do this. Your career." "My grandfather landed at Incheon with the Marines," Ross interrupted. "He came home and never talked about it. Never wore his medals. When he died, we buried him with full honors because that's what we do. That's what we've always done. We take care of our own." He paused. "I think my grandfather would kick my ass if I arrested you today." A laugh rippled through the assembled bikers. Part relief, part disbelief, part pure gratitude. Bagel shouted from the back. "Captain Ross, you just made a lot of new friends." Ross allowed himself a small smile. Then his expression turned serious. "But I need something from you, Master Chief." Wolf nodded. "Name it. Let us help. Let me assign an escort to take you to Arlington. Official police escort, lights and sirens, the whole thing. Because if I let you ride through on your own, every county between here and D.C. is going to try what Miller tried. But if you've got state police leading the way..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Wolf considered it, then looked back at his convoy. 300 riders who'd given up jobs and time and comfort to be here. Who'd ridden through storms and police harassment and every obstacle thrown at them. "Any of you object to a police escort?" Wolf called out. The laughter was louder this time, mixed with cheers and applause. Razor, the former rival club president, shouted, "Hell, I never thought I'd say this, but God bless the state police." Ross keyed his radio. "All units, reform as escort formation. We're taking these patriots to Arlington, and we're doing it right. Morrison, I want every available car we have. Full honors, full motorcade, and anyone who has a problem with that can submit their objections in writing after I retire." Morrison grinned. "Yes, sir." Chief Deputy Miller, realizing he'd become the villain in this story, backed slowly toward his cruiser. Nobody stopped him. Nobody even looked at him. He'd become irrelevant. Ross walked to the coffin and placed his hand gently on the flag. "Sergeant Major Penny, I apologize for the delay. We'll get you home now." Wolf joined him, and for a moment, the two warriors stood together in silent respect for a third who'd made the journey before them. Then Ross turned to his officers. "Mount up. We've got a hero to bury." The riot vehicles moved aside. The spike strips were rolled up, and 300 bikers, flanked by 24 state police cars with lights blazing, prepared to finish the last leg of the journey. But before they could move, Wolf called out, "Captain Ross." Ross turned. "Thank you for remembering what matters." Ross nodded. "Anytime, Master Chief. Anytime." The convoy that rolled into Arlington National Cemetery at 1,500 hours was like nothing the sacred grounds had ever seen. State police cruisers led the way, lights painting the autumn trees in blues and reds. Behind them, 300 motorcycles in perfect formation, engines idling at respectful volume. Behind them, news helicopters keeping a respectful distance. Behind them, America watching. The cemetery administrator, a retired Army colonel named Patterson who'd spent the morning frantically making calls to the Pentagon, stood at the entrance with full ceremonial guard ready, 7 rifles, a bugler, and a color guard that had been assembled in less than 3 hours. He'd gotten the call from the Secretary of Defense personally. "Colonel, I don't care what the paperwork says. I don't care about administrative errors. Sergeant Major Arthur Penny is going to be buried with full honors today, or you and I will both be looking for new jobs tomorrow. Are we clear?" Crystal clear. Patterson watched the convoy approach and felt a lump form in his throat. He'd overseen thousands of military funerals, but this was different. Wolf dismounted and approached the colonel, removing his helmet. "Sir," Wolf said formally, "I'm here to." "Master Chief Sterling." Patterson cut him off with a salute. "We've been expecting Sergeant Major Penny. His plot has been prepared in Section 60, alongside other veterans of the European theater. The honor guard is ready." He paused. "I apologize for the delay. The error was unconscionable." Wolf returned the salute. "No apologies necessary, sir. We're here now." Patterson gestured to the waiting honor guard. "If you'll allow us to transfer the sergeant major to the caisson." But Wolf shook his head. "With respect, sir, we'll carry him." From the convoy, 6 bikers stepped forward. Big Al, Jinx, Razor, 2 Vietnam vets named Murphy and Chun, and a former Marine named Williams who'd lost both legs in Fallujah and walked on prosthetics. They formed up around the coffin with military precision. These were Arthur's real honor guard. Men and women who'd never met him but understood what he represented. Who'd crossed 300 miles of highway to make sure he wasn't forgotten. The cemetery honor guard, rather than looking offended, snapped to attention and raised their rifles in salute as the bikers lifted the coffin. The procession moved slowly through Arlington's winding paths. Tourists stopped and removed their hats. Other families holding funerals paused their own ceremonies to pay respects. The entire cemetery seemed to hold its breath. Section 60 waited beneath oak trees going gold with autumn. The grave was perfectly dug, the headstone already in place with Arthur's name, rank, and service dates. Someone, Patterson, probably, had worked miracles. The bikers lowered the coffin with a gentleness that belied their rough exterior. Wolf stood at the head, Captain Ross at his side, 300 riders forming a massive circle around the gravesite. The bugler raised his instrument. Taps echoed across Arlington's hills. That mournful, beautiful sound that every veteran knows, that every family member dreads, that every American should hear at least once to remember what freedom costs. The honor guard fired 3 volleys into the autumn sky. Birds scattered from trees. Somewhere in the distance, another funeral party paused to count the shots, 21 in total. Full honors. 2 soldiers stepped forward and began folding the flag that had covered Arthur's coffin. Wolf watched their hands move through the 13 precise folds, each one symbolic, each one practiced 1,000 times in training. When they finished, the flag was a perfect triangle of stars. But instead of presenting it to Wolf, the soldiers looked uncertain. There was no official next of kin present. Wolf nodded toward Patterson. "The colonel will accept it on behalf of the nation." But Patterson shook his head. "Master Chief, you brought him home. You earned the right to receive this flag." One of the soldiers turned to Wolf and knelt, extending the flag. "On behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service." Wolf's hands shook as he took the flag. This wasn't his to receive. He wasn't family by blood. But Arthur had no blood left. No children, no siblings, no cousins. Just brothers in arms, and brothers by choice. He held the flag to his chest and felt the weight of it. not the physical weight, but the weight of every mile ridden, every obstacle overcome, every person who'd helped bring Arthur home. The ceremony concluded. The crowd began to disperse, but Wolf remained, kneeling beside the grave as workers prepared to lower the coffin. He placed one hand on the polished wood. "Mission complete, Arthur," he whispered. "You're home now. You're with your brothers. And I promise you, sir, I promise, nobody's going to forget. Not ever." Captain Ross approached quietly and stood at attention. "Master Chief, it was an honor." Wolf stood, extending his hand. Ross shook it firmly. "The honor was mine, Captain. Thank you for remembering what the uniform really means." "I learned it from men like you," Ross replied. "And men like him." He nodded toward the grave. Behind them, 300 bikers were mounting their rides. But they didn't start their engines, not yet. Not until Wolf gave the signal. This was his moment, Arthur's moment, and they wouldn't intrude. Big Al approached, his massive frame somehow looking smaller in the shadow of Arlington's trees. "Boss, whenever you're ready. We'll follow you out." Wolf took one last look at the headstone. Fresh carved marble that read, SGM Arthur J. Penny, United States Army, 1927 to 2025, Omaha Beach. Duty, honor, country. He saluted one final time, then turned to his waiting convoy. "Let's ride," he said quietly. 300 engines roared to life, the sound rolling across Arlington like thunder. But it wasn't angry thunder. It was respectful, powerful, a promise that Arthur's sacrifice and service would be remembered not just in marble and ceremonies, but in the lives of those who carried the warrior's code forward. The convoy departed slowly, maintaining formation, American flags still flying. News cameras captured the whole thing. The viral videos would be watched hundreds of millions of times. Politicians would give speeches. Editorials would be written. The VA would announce reforms to prevent this from happening again. But none of that mattered to Wolf. He'd accomplished his mission. He'd brought his brother home. And as the convoy merged onto I-95 heading north, 300 bikes riding into the sunset like something out of legend, Wolf allowed himself something he rarely permitted. He smiled. Because for once, the system hadn't won. The bureaucrats hadn't won. The paper pushers and rule followers and cowards who sent men to war but couldn't be bothered to bring them home with dignity, they hadn't won. The warriors had won. And Arthur Penny, Sergeant Major, United States Army, was finally at rest among his brothers. The ride back was different. Not just because Captain Ross had assigned a permanent police escort, though the state police cruisers flanking the convoy were certainly new. Not just because the media had turned them from outlaws to heroes overnight, though the news helicopters keeping respectful distance were a change. It was different because the mission was complete. The weight that had pressed on Wolf's shoulders for the past week, the driving urgency that had turned a simple burial into a 300-mile odyssey, had lifted. Arthur was home. The promise was kept. The debt was paid. At a rest stop 50 miles north of Arlington, the convoy pulled over. Ross had radioed ahead, and the state police had cleared the entire facility. No civilian traffic, just space for 300 bikers to decompress. Wolf killed his engine and dismounted, feeling every one of his 55 years in his knees and back. He'd been riding for 12 hours straight, and his body was reminding him that he wasn't 25 anymore. Big Al appeared with coffee from somewhere, pressing the cup into Wolf's hands. "You good, boss?" Wolf sipped the coffee. It was terrible, rest stop sludge, and it was perfect. "Yeah, I'm good." Jinx approached, still wearing her helmet, mascara streak tracks visible through the visor. That was something. What we did today. What we all did, Wolf corrected. Couldn't have done it alone. Razor joined them, and the sight was surreal. The president of a rival MC, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Iron Patriots leadership, no tension, no posturing. Just tired riders who'd accomplished something bigger than club politics. "You know this changes things, right?" Razor said. "After today, after what happened on that bridge, people are going to look at us different. At all of us." Wolf nodded slowly. "Maybe. For a while. Then they'll forget, and we'll go back to being outlaws and criminals in their eyes." "Maybe not all of them," Captain Ross said, approaching the group. He'd removed his campaign hat, his hair sweat-plastered to his forehead. "Master Chief, I've been getting calls for the past hour. Every major news network wants interviews. The governor wants to present you with some kind of commendation. Hell, even the president's office reached out." Wolf's expression hardened. Tell them no. Sir. No interviews. No commendations. No medals or ceremonies or photo ops. This wasn't about publicity. This was about bringing Arthur home. That's done. I'm going back to my garage, and in a week, everybody will move on to the next viral story. Ross studied him for a long moment. You really believe that? That people will forget? People always forget, Wolf said quietly. That's why we have to remember for them. A young rider, Tommy, the kid who'd almost broken formation back at the checkpoint, approached hesitantly. Wolf, sir? I wanted to say I'm sorry. For almost losing my cool back there. You were right. It wasn't about us. Wolf gripped the kid's shoulder. You stayed in formation when it mattered. That's what counts. But learn from it. Discipline isn't about following orders you agree with. It's about staying true to the mission even when every instinct is screaming at you to do something else. Tommy nodded, the lesson sinking in deeper than any lecture could have. Patterson, the Arlington administrator, had made an appearance at the rest stop, apparently driving up to personally deliver something. He found Wolf and handed him an envelope. What's this? Wolf asked. Documentation, Patterson replied. Full records of Sergeant Major Penny's burial. The plot number, the GPS coordinates, everything. So you can visit whenever you want. And, he hesitated. I took the liberty of checking our database. There are 17 other World War II veterans currently in similar situations, administrative errors, missing paperwork, families who can't afford proper burial. If you're interested, I can forward you the list. Wolf stared at the envelope, then at Patterson. You're serious. Dead serious. The Secretary of Defense personally authorized me to expedite any cases you bring to our attention. Consider it penance for failing these men the first time. Wolf carefully folded the envelope and tucked it into his vest. I'll be in touch. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and purple, the convoy began to fracture. Riders heading home to different states, different lives, different clubs. They exchanged numbers, promised to stay in touch, swore this wouldn't be the last time they rode together. Big Al crushed Wolf in a bear hug that probably cracked ribs. You need anything, you call me. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. on Christmas. We're brothers now. Jinx just saluted, tears streaming again, unable to speak. Razor extended his hand for a shake, and when Wolf took it, the rival club president pulled him close. The Northland Riders owe you a debt. You showed us what this life is really about. That debt's good forever. Captain Ross was the last to say goodbye. He stood at attention one more time, offering another salute. Master Chief Sterling, it's been the honor of my career. Wolf returned it. Captain Ross, you're one of the good ones. Don't let the bureaucrats grind that out of you. I'll try, sir. Ross paused. My grandfather, when he came back from Korea, he used to tell me that the real heroes were the ones who didn't come back. The ones who stayed behind. I never really understood that until today. Your grandfather was a wise man, Wolf said. Honor his memory by living up to it. I will, sir. As the rest stop emptied and engines roared to life for the final time, Wolf stood alone beside his Harley, the sidecar now empty of its sacred cargo. He ran his hand over the brass nameplate he'd commissioned for Arthur, deciding he'd keep it mounted. A permanent reminder of the mission. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a video. It was Emma Chin's viral footage, but someone had added something at the end, a montage of photos from the day. The convoy in the rain. The standoff at the bridge. The salutes. The burial. Set to a simple instrumental version of the Star-Spangled Banner. The final image was Arthur's headstone, fresh flowers already laid by anonymous visitors. The caption, they said he didn't matter. They were wrong. Hashtag Arthur goes home, hashtag never forgotten. 24 million views. 150,000 shares. Comments in the hundreds of thousands. Wolf closed the phone and looked up at the darkening sky. We did it, Arthur, he said to the stars beginning to appear. You're home. You're remembered. And I promise you, brother, this isn't the last one. There are 17 more names on that list, and they all deserve what we gave you. He mounted his Harley, started the engine, and pulled out onto the highway. Alone again, but not lonely, because somewhere behind him were 300 riders who'd proven that brotherhood transcended club colors. Somewhere ahead were 17 forgotten heroes waiting for someone to bring them home. And somewhere above, he liked to think Arthur Penny was smiling, finally at peace. The road stretched out before Wolf Sterling, endless and dark and full of missions yet to come. He twisted the throttle and rode into the night, a lone warrior on an eternal vigil, making sure that those who gave everything would never be forgotten. 6 months later, Wolf returned to Arlington. It was early spring, the cherry blossoms painting the cemetery in shades of pink and white. He rode alone this time. No convoy, no cameras, no fanfare. Just him and his Harley, rumbling quietly through the winding paths to Section 60. Arthur's grave was easy to find now, not because Wolf had memorized the plot number, but because it was never empty. Flowers, flags, small tokens left by visitors who'd never known Arthur Penny in life, but had learned his story in death. A challenge coin from an active duty SEAL, a Purple Heart replica from a Vietnam veteran, a child's drawing of an American flag with "Thank you for your service" written in crayon. Wolf knelt and cleared away some dead leaves, arranging the offerings more neatly. He'd been coming once a month, always alone, always at dawn before the crowds arrived. "Hey, old man," he said quietly. "Brought you something." He pulled out a photograph, black and white, creased with age. It showed 2 young soldiers in World War II uniforms, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera with the invincibility of youth. Wolf's father and Arthur, somewhere in France, 1944. "Found this in my dad's old footlocker. Figured you'd want it nearby." He propped the photo against the headstone and sat back on his heels. "You started something, you know that?" After your story went viral, the VA got flooded with tips about other forgotten veterans. Patterson's been working overtime. We've brought home 12 more so far. World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Every one of them got the full treatment. Hundreds of riders showing up, police escorts, the works. It's become a thing. They're calling it the Sterling Protocol. A jogger passed by, noticed Wolf, and slowed. The man was younger, maybe 30, wearing a Marines t-shirt. He approached hesitantly. "Excuse me, sir. Are you Wolf Sterling?" Wolf stood, evaluating the young man. Military bearing, even in civilian clothes. Good eye contact. Depends on who's asking. The jogger extended his hand. "Corporal Jake Morrison, sir. 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. I was in Helmand Province when all this happened. We heard about what you did. Every Marine in my unit followed the story. It reminded us why we serve." Wolf shook his hand. "You serve because your country calls. I just made sure one of our own got home." "It was more than that, sir." Morrison's voice was thick with emotion. "My grandfather is 89. World War II. He's in a VA home in Pennsylvania, and the staff, they don't treat him right. They don't understand what he did. After I saw your story, I started visiting every week, bringing other vets from my unit, making sure he knows he's not forgotten." Wolf felt something loosen in his chest. "That's good. That's what matters. There's talk of doing a convoy for him, sir, when his time comes. Nothing as big as this, but would you ride with us? It would mean everything." Wolf was quiet for a moment, looking at Arthur's grave, at the 12 other headstones he'd stood beside in the past 6 months, at the endless rows of white marble stretching across Arlington's hills. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'll ride. Send me the details when the time comes." Morrison's face split into a grin. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." After the jogger left, Wolf spent another hour at the grave, just sitting, thinking. His phone buzzed periodically, texts from Big Al about a charity ride, from Jinx about a documentary crew wanting to interview them, from Patterson about veteran number 18 who needed help. The mission never really ended, Wolf realized. There would always be another Arthur Penny, another family that needed help, another wrong that needed righting. It was exhausting. It was necessary. It was the life he'd chosen. Captain Ross had been promoted to major, largely on the strength of his handling of the convoy incident. He'd called Wolf personally to share the news, and to ask for advice on a new program he was designing, training police officers to better interact with veteran communities. Miller had resigned in disgrace, his career destroyed by viral videos of him screaming at bikers and police officers alike. Nobody missed him. Emma Chun, the teenager who'd filmed the original video, had started a non-profit connecting forgotten veterans with volunteer advocates. She'd called it Arthur's Army. The ripples were still spreading. Wolf stood, brushing dirt from his knees. He placed his hand on Arthur's headstone one more time. "Rest easy, brother. We've got the watch." As he walked back to his Harley, He noticed a young couple standing at another grave nearby. A recent burial, the earth still fresh. The woman was crying. The man looked lost. Wolf recognized the look. The look of people who'd just lost someone to war and didn't know how to carry that weight. He approached carefully. "Excuse me. I don't mean to intrude, but is this your first time here?" The man nodded. "My brother, Marine. He was killed in Syria 3 weeks ago. We don't know how to do this." Wolf's voice was gentle. "You're doing it. You showed up. That's what matters. And you keep showing up, week after week, year after year, until it hurts a little less. And then you make sure everyone else shows up too. You make sure he's not forgotten." The woman wiped her eyes. "How long does it take for it to hurt less?" "I'll let you know when I find out," Wolf said honestly. "But you're not alone. There's a whole community of people who understand. Who'll ride with you, stand with you, remember with you. You just have to ask." He handed them a card. Simple, black, with just a phone number and the words, "Iron Patriots MC, no one left behind. Call if you need anything. Anything at all." As Wolf rode out of Arlington for the last time that day, the sun was rising higher, burning off the morning mist. The cemetery was waking up, visitors arriving, groundskeepers tending to graves, life continuing around and through the markers of death. His phone rang. "Patterson. Wolf, we've got a situation in Montana. Korean War veteran, no family. VA says he doesn't qualify for." "I'm on it," Wolf interrupted. "Send me the details. I'll make some calls. There's something else. A reporter from 60 Minutes wants to do a full segment. They want to follow you on the next convoy, show the whole process." "No," Wolf said firmly. "We don't do this for publicity, Patterson. We do it because it's right." "I know, but think about how much awareness it could raise. How many more veterans it could help." Wolf was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then, "Let me think about it. But if I agree, it's on my terms. No staged shots, no scripted moments. They film what happens, nothing more." "Fair enough. I'll tell them." Wolf ended the call and accelerated onto the highway, the Harley's engine settling into that familiar rhythm. Ahead of him, hundreds of miles of road. Behind him, a grave that would never be empty of visitors. Around him, a world that had briefly remembered what honor looked like. He thought about Arthur, about his father, about all the men and women who'd worn the uniform and made the sacrifice. About the ones who came home and the ones who didn't. About the ones who were still fighting, still serving, still carrying the weight. And he thought about the convoy, 300 riders who'd come together for a single mission and proven that brotherhood was stronger than politics, that honor mattered more than rules, that some things were worth fighting for even when the whole world said no. His vest bore 17 new names now, stitched beneath Arthur's. 17 more missions completed. 17 more warriors brought home. There would be more. There would always be more. But that was okay. Because Wolf Sterling wasn't looking for an end to the mission. He was looking for meaning in the journey. And he'd found it on a rain-soaked highway, surrounded by brothers he'd never met and would never forget. The road stretched out endlessly ahead. Wolf twisted the throttle and rode toward the horizon, a lone warrior on an eternal vigil. Making sure the fallen were honored. Making sure the living remembered. Making sure that no one, not ever, not on his watch, would be left behind. The Arlington National Cemetery received a special visitor on a crisp autumn morning. The President of the United States walked through Section 60, flanked by Secret Service and military aides, stopping at a particular grave. Arthur Penny's headstone gleamed in the morning sun, covered with fresh flowers and tokens from recent visitors. Beside it stood 17 other graves, each one marked with a small brass plaque reading, "Brought home by the Iron Patriots MC, never forgotten." The president knelt, placed a presidential coin beside Arthur's nameplate, and stood to address the assembled press. "These 18 men and women represent a failure of our system," the president said quietly. "But they also represent the very best of who we are as Americans. Because when the government failed them, their brothers and sisters in arms did not. Today, I'm announcing the Veterans Final Honor Act, a comprehensive reform ensuring that no veteran, regardless of administrative status, will ever be denied the burial they earned." In the back of the crowd, wearing a simple leather vest and avoiding cameras, Wolf Sterling listened. Captain Ross, now Lieutenant Colonel Ross, head of the new Veterans Affairs Liaison Program, stood beside him. "You did this. Ross said quietly. All of this. The reforms, the awareness, the change. Wolf shook his head. Arthur did this. I just drove the bike. Don't sell yourself short, Master Chief. Wolf smiled slightly. I'm not. But I know the truth. One man, one mission, one convoy. That's just a story. But thousands of people deciding to remember, to honor, to give a damn about the ones who served? That's a movement. And movements don't need leaders. They just need someone to light the first match. Ross nodded slowly. What's next for you? Wolf pulled out his phone, showing a new message from Patterson. Veteran number 42 needs help. Vietnam. Agent Orange. Died homeless in Seattle. No family. VA says. Same thing that's always next, Wolf said. Another mission. Another ride. Another promise to keep. He started to walk away, then turned back. Colonel, when my time comes, don't make a fuss. No presidential coins, no ceremonies. Just a simple grave, a simple marker. And maybe, he smiled, maybe 300 bikes to see me off. Ross saluted. It would be our honor, sir. Wolf returned it, then disappeared into the crowd. Just another veteran paying respects, invisible in the way he preferred. But as he walked past the graves, 18 now, soon to be 19, 42, hundreds more, he noticed something that made him stop. At each grave, small American flags had been planted. And on each flag, a handwritten note. Thank you for showing us what honor looks like. Jake Morrison. My grandfather died last month. Because of you, he had 300 riders at his funeral. Emma Chun. You inspired me to join the Veterans Advocacy Corps. We've helped 1,200 families this year. Jinx Rodriguez. The Northland Riders have adopted Section 60. We maintain it, visit it, make sure it's never forgotten. Razor. Wolf read them all, his vision blurring slightly. Maybe Ross was right. Maybe he had done something. Not just for Arthur, but for everyone who came after. Not just for the dead, but for the living who needed to remember why the dead mattered. He walked to his Harley, started the engine, and rode slowly out of Arlington. Toward Highway 95. Toward Seattle. Toward veteran number 42. Toward another mission, another promise, another chance to prove that honor wasn't dead. It was just waiting for someone brave enough to fight for it. The engine roared. The flag on his bike snapped in the wind. And Wolf Sterling, Master Chief Petty Officer, retired, disappeared into the American landscape, a guardian angel on two wheels, making sure that those who gave everything would never, ever be forgotten.